Okay, I really have to think about what I want to say here, because I've been holding off on making a video about Over the Garden Wall. It's like my favorite thing ever in all of media history. I only get one shot, one opportunity, mom's spaghetti, to make a really good video about it. Okay, I'm ready. You know what I think about a lot? The icy hand of death, slowly but surely reaching up from the depths to pull me out of this vessel I inhabit into the abyss, into that which we cannot see or comprehend, into the eternal unknown, where I may or may not be greeted by a frog playing a piano. Over the Garden Wall really is one of my absolute favorite pieces of media. It's up there with the Nier games, which on the surface are two wildly different things, but they both cover the very particular niche ground of existentialist charm. There's an optimistic melancholy to them. They explore these terrifying philosophical ideas of self and death with a sort of a confused shrug. And I find that somehow both relatable and aspirational. And while there's a lot to be said, and probably has been said, about Over the Garden Wall's painstakingly detailed artwork, the beautiful soundtrack that feels like the love child of the weirdest Danny Elfman score and one of the more normal Tom Waits albums, and of course, my boundless love for anything that involves Elijah Wood, what I think really makes this quirky, haunted slice of Americana tick is its depiction of a lost and labyrinthine space between life and death. I don't want to call it pleasant, because it's not, really, but it's one that feels like it's beckoning, even as its every shadowy corner itches with malice. The unknown feels a lot like a living nursery rhyme, charming and nostalgic and oddly lulling, but then you start to think about it, and you start to understand what it really is. It's not a direct allegory for death, but it is intertwined with the concept, a metaphorical conglomeration of different purgatorial ideas, life and death and folklore and dreams and other varying spiritual miscellanea, built to offer embrace to the lost. When you look at this story as a whole, it's not really about death, but a lot of it is about hope and fear and purpose. And while the concept of purgatory would normally be to ease those distinctly human struggles at the end of their days, under the right circumstances, it's just as effective at abusing them. The existential core of Over the Garden Wall, at least for our main duo, is the cassette tape. And if you think that's silly, you enjoyed high school too much. Wirt and Greg are sort of cosmically bound by their incomplete relationship. They're half-brothers. Do you get it? They ironically represent each other's fractured identities. Greg's position is simple. He wants to be helpful to Wirt, whom he looks up to, but he keeps screwing everything up, making him feel more and more like a burden. Wirt has slightly more teenaged problems. You see, the cassette is sort of a MacGuffinified representation of Wirt's warring desires to be himself and also not be a big ol' no-friends loser whose crush laughs at him in public. Everyone has a cassette tape, especially at that age. What the tape for Sarah physically embodies is Wirt's easily disoriented sense of belonging, which will make more sense on a cosmic level very shortly. What we are seeing as Greg dumps it into Sarah's jacket is obviously not malice. He's like 10, he has no idea what he's doing. But that's kind of the point. He's so grounded and impulsive, he somewhat literally frightens Wirt. Greg's inability to grasp his brother's radiating teen angst actually exacerbates it, because what we are then dealing with in Greg is a near supernatural agent of chaos designed to physically call into question Wirt's already embattled identity. The need to center yourself in the universe is very much immediate and all-consuming, and in this story, Wirt's need to center himself is an immeasurable distance away on a cassette tape being greased on by Jason fucking Funderburger. His sense of self is written onto that tape, and while his social life would probably recover from the cringe, the Wirts of the world do not recover from having their true selves exposed and given the proverbial social swirly in the gym bathroom. By all accounts, our boy is a nervous wreck. He's sensitive, anxious, fretful, meek, and really pretty cynical, which, don't get me wrong, it's nice to finally see myself represented in media, but these attributes does not a hero make, not even in a casually vaudevillian divine comedy riff, which it kind of is, but also not really. So why is Wirt the protagonist and not the ambitious and heroic, if naive, archetype that dominated this particular era? Because a traditional hero is traditionally foiled by greater existential questions. Purpose, morality, belonging, hope, and despair. These are the true trials of the hero's journey. Wirt doesn't have time for that crap. He was born in the anxiety, molded by it, and it makes him strong. Obviously, he is nothing if not a fragile soul, but in a fun twist, Wirt's just so gosh darn cynical that he bounces around the unknown, reminding everyone what really matters. Sort of. Wirt's special superpower is that what he's really afraid of, in this place where fear whips through the trees like the wind itself, is being hurt. Yes, he's also afraid of the slow, gruesome death of being turned into lamp food, but this is a troubled pair of boys we're following, and their relative unease doesn't just upset the status quo, the chaos of their self-preservation forces the unknown to grow. Wirt is a ball of confused, generally quite insecure energy, and his trust issues, his awkward fussing, and to a certain extent his refusal to take responsibility for his precocious half-brother, do accidentally bring the people of the unknown closer together by causing messes, and then kind of fixing them by just thinking outside the box, which isn't very impressive, but in a story about people who fear uncertainty, it kinda makes sense. Which is great for the folksy weirdos who inhabit the unknown, but not for Wirt, who leaves every encounter feeling more lost and further justified in his worldview. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's not very inviting, but it is from the outside. As the viewer, our ability to relate to Wirt as an apprehensive, pessimistic, and reluctant hero, and our appreciation for the unknown's deconstruction of afterlife are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they work in pretty clever harmony. To reiterate, Wirt is in no way a model character. He's a chronic self-isolator in a place where people are somewhat forcibly isolated by greater existential threats. What we want to see is his ideas of solitude and togetherness challenged and dissolved in the same way he and Greg challenged the unknown's ideas of purpose and hope. Which, not unlike the show, brings us back to the cassette tape. Wirt's problems are shown in the flashback sequence to be unequivocally self-inflicted. People are generally happy to see him. Overall, his life seems fine, what little of it we've come to grasp, but because he's personally unsure of his place in the world in his changing life, he projects an air of hostility onto his environment. A lot of us do the same, both to our social situations and to life itself. Wirt's primal fear over the cassette tape and his emotional distance from his half-brother are representative of someone who feels truly lost, like a leaf on the wind, or a small child in a Walmart who followed a random woman dressed like their mother into the camping supplies section. No, it's not specific because I did that. It's specific because I'm creative and I like to flex. Shut up. With so little to cling to and so little control over it, there is nothing to do when you find yourself in the unknown, so you lash out and eventually just give up. We see a lot of ourselves in Wirt, not necessarily in an aspirational way, but in a sympathetic way. We don't want him to make the same mistakes we have. We don't want him to be proven right. We want him to come back down to earth and see the good he's doing, even accidentally. And above all else, we want him to understand the unknown. It's a chance to see the bigger picture, to truly, almost literally, grasp your own place in the universe. The unknown isn't just charming and weird because it's funny or because Patrick McHale knew it would make for a cult classic. It's like that because the point is to teach Wirt that the malice he assigns to his surroundings and the walls he keeps to defend himself are unhealthy. Even walking through the proverbial valley of death, as long as he stays calm and thinks things through, he doesn't have to be afraid. Come on, Wirt, don't fear the Reaper. They say that when you're truly ready, death embraces you with open arms, which is very beautiful. But what Over the Garden Wall proposes is that if you are not ready, death may fumble you about like a drunkard on the street until you force your way out of its grasp. Undeniably less beautiful, I'll admit to that, but as a walking, perpetual existential crisis, I can honestly say it makes me feel better about the inevitability of death for some reason. It works because, once again, this story isn't about death. It uses death as a parallel to help it explore its themes of identity and perspective. Optimism and pessimism, hope and despair, Jägermeister and Rumpelminz, I'll let you pick which one's which. The wavelength that Wirt and Greg wildly oscillate upon as they wander the unknown is a sort of human baseline, the spiritual makeup of the average idiot. We are but stardust on a twirling rock, and we all must ask ourselves, some of us way more often than others, if there is more to our very being, or if we just do stuff and then we die and then nothing. Over the Garden Wall is probably not here to sell you on its weird pumpkin religion, but it understands the value of a purgatory in which we are able to control our destiny. From the onset, there is a clear version of the future in which Wirt and Greg find their way out of the unknown, and that it's presented as an optimistic venture undercuts Wirt's ideology immediately. It also demands a more physical representation of malice to be the cosmically ironic foil to Wirt's general anxiety. And malice he is, the fucking freak. I love this guy. The Beast narratively exists more so in contrast to the unknown than as part of it. The two prevailing ideologies of death, one lonesome, cold, and forgotten, and the other warm, inviting, and communal. Not so much heaven and hell as the more nebulous, better place and nothingness. That he is kept alive by quite literally gaslighting his victims is a charmingly grotesque touch, but as a functional part of this world, he operates sort of like a nihilistic Venus flytrap. His work is subtle, he blurs the line between himself and the unknown. It's heavily implied that he's not a physical threat, that he's incapable of feeding the lantern alone, but occasionally fights the woodsman for it just to keep him desperate. The Beast is a creature that somewhat literally subsists on the most toxic cycle of self-isolation. Obsession, dejection, despair, and then tree, which isn't the usual last stage, but it's a metaphor, so what do you want? The point is, as an agent of malice, the Beast abuses the purgatorial nature of the unknown to ensnare people who don't belong, and refuse to see that the labyrinth doesn't want them either. The unknown is a place of deep, almost peaceful melancholy. It's designed to feel like an ether, a place with no direction. Every other shot in this series looks like it belongs on a Liminal Space's Twitter account, and it's because this vision of the labyrinth is one where your perspective is the difference between lost and found. You can choose to believe that it's a place that wants you disoriented and lonely. You can choose to chase the one little flame you see. But that's stupid, so says the hero of this story, and he's right. The Beast's deal is objectively terrible, and I think that's the best part of the whole story. The point of the Beast is to take that hostility and malice the Wirts of the world assign to the universe and give life to it. All that fear and anxiety and hopelessness, you continuously feed it until there is nothing left of you. That's what it wants. When you see it presented as a literal villain, no matter how spooky and well presented, just a little bit of thought and you go, oh no, I don't want that, thanks. Brilliant writing, unironically. This is what we waited to see from Wirt, not because it's exciting or anything, it's kind of charmingly anticlimactic, if anything, but it's mature. It knows the difference between responsibility and guilt. Wirt has grown up enough to believe he can still help his brother without becoming his keeper. And on a cosmic scale, what this stands in for is the knowledge that there is more to them, that at least for now, they're still together, and they'll leave together soon. Over the Garden Wall is a perfectly executed story of self-discovery, juxtaposing a profound backdrop of existential dread with a far more accessible instance of adolescent psychosocial dread. And it plays so delicately with this massive undertaking to remind us, on a fundamental level, that it just ain't that deep, bro. There's something very emotional in the experience of watching this story unfold for someone genuinely, constantly plagued by anxiety about self and death and purpose. It's a vision that turns our inherent fear of the unknown on its head. It knows the greater ethereal macrocosm it's born from and exploits it to stress the importance of connection and honesty. Honesty to yourself, and I guess to the old lady whose painted rock you stole. Yeah. Well, now that I think about it, I guess Greg doesn't actually tell her he stole it. He just returns it. But it's close enough. So this Halloween, don't steal people's decorations.
Everything is nice and fine all the time. The softest clouds and rainbow skies ain't gonna lie. We always have the most spectacular